The twin suns of Kepler-7 cast long shadows across the dusty marketplace of New Sol Colony. As morning traders began setting up their stalls, the air hung thick with tension and the smell of exotic spices from a dozen different worlds. Ji-hoon, Kim moved through the crowd like a ghost, his weathered hands examining purple vegetables from the Centauri system, while his sharp eyes tracked every movement in the plaza. 3 years of living under Vorth occupation had taught every human on this frontier world the same bitter lesson. Keep your head down, blend in, and never give the aliens a reason to notice you. But old habits died hard for a former Earth Navy SEAL, and Ji-hoon's trained instincts screamed danger every time he stepped into public spaces. The morning crowd was typical for market day. Human colonists shuffled between stalls with downcast eyes, their voices barely above whispers as they haggled for supplies. A few brave children darted between the adults, their laughter quickly hushed by nervous parents. Overhead, Vorth patrol drones hummed like mechanical wasps, their red scanning beams sweeping the gathered humans for signs of rebellion. Ji-hoon paused at Minsu's vegetable stand, pretending interest in a basket of strange blue roots, while his peripheral vision catalogued threats. 2 Vorth soldiers stood guard at the plaza's eastern entrance, their plasma rifles gleaming in the sunlight. Another pair monitored the crowd from an elevated platform near the old fountain. Standard occupation protocol. Enough firepower to crush any uprising before it started. The sound hit the plaza like thunder. A hoverbike's massive engine roared overhead as it descended from the colony's upper levels, its anti-gravity generators kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Conversations died instantly as every human instinctively hunched their shoulders and looked away. The bike was military-grade, all black chrome and angular surfaces designed to intimidate rather than impress. Ji-hoon's blood turned to ice as he recognized the rider, Crusher 9, one of the most brutal enforcers in the Vorth garrison. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall when he dismounted, his reptilian hide covered in ceremonial scars that marked his kills in a dozen wars across the galaxy. His massive hands could crush a human skull like an egg, and his yellow eyes held the cold intelligence of a predator that had never known defeat. The marketplace fell silent, except for the settling tick of cooling metal as Crusher 9's hoverbike powered down. Even the children stopped their games, sensing the danger that radiated from the alien like heat from a furnace. The Vorth enforcer's armored boots clicked against the stone pavement as he surveyed his domain, savoring the fear he inspired in the gathered humans. That's when Ji-hoon spotted him. Sungmin Park sat alone on a weathered bench near the fountain, his back straight despite his 80 years. The old man wore his faded Martian War veteran's jacket with quiet pride, the patches and medals telling the story of humanity's greatest victory against impossible odds. His wrinkled hands rested calmly on his walking stick, while his sharp eyes watched the alien with undisguised contempt. Crusher 9 noticed the defiant stare and smiled, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Here was sport, entertainment, a chance to remind these pathetic humans of their place in the new order. His heavy footsteps echoed across the plaza as he approached the bench, each impact sending small tremors through the ground. "Move, old human," the Vorth snarled, his voice like grinding metal. His standard was crude but effective, learned from interrogating prisoners. This space reserved for superior beings. The marketplace held its breath. Ji-hoon felt his muscles, tense as combat instincts warred with survival logic. Interfering would mean death for himself and probably a dozen innocent bystanders. But watching felt like betraying everything he'd sworn to protect. Sungmin Park looked up slowly, his weathered face calm as mountain stone. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd faced death 1,000 times and never flinched. "I fought for the right to sit where I choose, alien. This bench was here before you arrived, and it'll be here after you leave." The words hit Crusher 9 like a physical blow. No human had dared speak to him with such disrespect since the occupation began. His massive hand rose like a striking snake, but the old veteran never moved, never even blinked. The slap echoed across the plaza like a gunshot. Sungmin's frail body crumpled to the ground, his walking stick clattering across the stones as blood trickled from his split lip. The Vorth enforcer threw back his head and laughed, the sound harsh and mocking as it bounced off the surrounding buildings. Humans scattered like frightened birds, grabbing children and ducking behind stalls. But Jihoon moved forward instead of away, his hands shaking with barely controlled rage as he activated the tiny recorder hidden in his jacket. Every second of the assault burned itself into the device's memory while he knelt beside the fallen. Veteran other colonists emerged from hiding to help, their faces pale with shock and fury. As they lifted Sung-min's broken form, Jihoon caught the old man's eye. What he saw there wasn't defeat or fear. It was the cold calculation of a warrior who knew this battle was just beginning. The walls of Jihoon's cramped apartment seemed to close in around him as he connected his recorder to the quantum transmitter, hidden behind a false panel. His hands shook slightly as he uploaded the footage, not from fear but from the rage burning in his chest like molten steel. The old-fashioned apartment with its peeling paint and flickering lights was the perfect cover, just another struggling colonist trying to survive under alien rule. But beneath the floorboards lay technology that could reach across star systems in minutes. The resistance network had taken years to build, connecting human settlements scattered across dozens of worlds through encrypted channels that piggybacked on commercial shipping routes. Each node was small, invisible to Vorth surveillance, but together they formed a web that spanned the galaxy. Jihoon's message was deliberately simple. No fancy words or dramatic speeches, just cold facts that would hit harder than any propaganda. They hurt our elder, Sung-min Park, 1st Battalion Martian Defense Corps, requesting immediate assistance. He attached the footage and hit send, then sat back to wait. The response came in less than 10 minutes. A soft chime from his hidden terminal announced incoming. Traffic from 17 different star systems. Jihoon's eyes widened as message after message flooded in. He'd expected maybe 3 or 4 replies from nearby worlds. Instead, his screen filled with responses from across known space. The first message came from the mining colonies of Kepler 442b. Package received. Old Wolf confirms identity. Moving to assist. The sender's code identified him as Ghost 7, but Jihoon knew the real name behind it. Hyun-woo Lee, former SEAL Team commander and one of the most decorated soldiers in human history. On the ice-covered mining station orbiting Kepler 442b's frozen surface, Hyun-woo's scarred hands gripped his workstation as the footage played across his screen. The mining platform was a brutal place where humans carved precious metals from asteroids under crushing pressure and deadly radiation. But it was also the perfect hiding spot for a man who'd officially died in the Battle of Proxima Station 3 years ago. Hyun-woo's jaw tightened as he watched Sung-min Park crumple under the alien's blow. The old man had been his instructor at the Naval Academy 20 years ago, the legendary trainer who'd turned scared recruits into humanity's deadliest warriors, the man who'd saved Hyun-woo's life during the siege of New Mars by teaching him that sometimes the best weapon was knowing when not to fight. Within minutes, Hyun-woo was coordinating with old teammates scattered across the galaxy. His quantum communicator came alive with familiar call signs as the Brotherhood responded to the call. The Vorth might control the major shipping lanes and military bases, but they'd never understood the invisible network of loyalty that connected human soldiers across time and space. Min-jae Choi received the message while tending massive biodomes on Terra Nova, humanity's agricultural Joule 3 systems away. The former explosives expert had traded his demolition charges for hydroponic gardens, but his hands still remembered how to build things that went boom. His massive farming operation was the perfect cover for moving supplies and people across the sector without attracting attention. Min-jae's weathered face hardened as he watched the assault footage. He'd served under Sung-min Park during the brutal campaigns on Europa's frozen moons. The old man had saved his unit when they were trapped behind enemy lines for 6 weeks, living on melted ice and recycled air while Vorth hunters tracked them through the caves. His fingers flew across his hidden terminal, sending coded messages to shipping captains and freight runners throughout the sector. Within hours, fast courier ships would be changing course toward New Sol Colony, their cargo holds filled with equipment that definitely wasn't on any official manifest. The third response came from the trade routes themselves, where So-young, Kang commanded a small fleet of independent freighters that kept the outer colonies supplied. Her ships looked like rust buckets, held together with prayer and duct tape, but their engines could outrun anything the Vorth military had in space. She'd learned to hide weapons shipments inside containers of farming equipment, and her crews were all former military who'd chosen exile over surrender. So Young was in the middle of a dangerous run through Vorth patrol zones when the message reached her ship. Her bridge crew watched nervously as their captain's expression turned deadly cold. They'd seen that look before, usually right before someone ended up floating in vacuum. She keyed her communicator to the fleet frequency. All ships priority Alpha. Change course for New Sol Colony combat loadout. Her crew exchanged glances, but began preparations without question. They trusted their captain completely, and they knew that look meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Across the galaxy, dozens of other responses flooded in. Former SEALs working as mechanics on space stations, ex-commandos running security for mining operations, Special Forces veterans who disappeared into civilian life but kept their skills sharp. Each had their own story, their own reason for hiding among the stars, but they all shared one thing in common. Sungmin Park had trained them all. The man who'd turned frightened recruits into humanity's finest warriors, the instructor who drilled into them the most important lesson of all: you never abandon family. And in the Brotherhood of Human Special Forces, family wasn't just blood relations. It was everyone who'd earned the right to call themselves human. The network was awakening, and the Vorth occupation forces had no idea what was coming for them. Crusher 9 stomped through the colony's main thoroughfare like he owned every grain of dust beneath his massive boots. The 8-foot-tall Vorth enforcer had no idea that death was measuring his every step from the shadows. His daily patrol route had become as predictable as the twin suns rising over New Sol Colony, and that predictability was about to become his greatest weakness. High above the colony's sprawling buildings, Hyunwoo's modified mining vessel descended through the atmosphere like a falling star. To any Vorth scanner, it looked like another cargo hauler bringing supplies to the Outer Rim colonies, but hidden in its reinforced cargo hold, advanced surveillance equipment hummed quietly alongside 3 of humanity's deadliest warriors. Varig ship touched down at the commercial spaceport with barely a whisper, its stealth modifications masking the sophisticated electronics packed into every available space. Within minutes, Hyunwoo and his team had vanished into the colony's maze of streets and alleyways, leaving behind only empty shipping containers and forged manifest records. Jiwon Yu had been living her cover identity for 2 years, working as a maintenance technician in the colony's power distribution center. To her Vorth supervisors, she was just another broken human, grateful for any work that kept her fed. They had no idea she'd once been the Navy's top electronics warfare specialist, capable of turning their own technology against them with surgical precision. Her workspace in the underground maintenance tunnels was the perfect command center. Surrounded by humming generators and coolant pipes, she accessed the colony's infrastructure systems through hidden taps she'd installed months ago. Her fingers danced across holographic displays as she dove deep into the digital nervous system that kept New Sol Colony running. The Vorth relied heavily on their technology, believing their advanced systems made them untouchable. But every piece of equipment had vulnerabilities if you knew where to look. Jiwon had spent years studying captured Vorth tech, learning to speak their machine's electronic language better than they did. Crusher 9's hoverbike was her first target. The massive vehicle was a masterpiece of alien engineering, powered by quantum fusion cells that could run for decades without maintenance. But like all complex systems, it had thousands of microscopic components that had to work in perfect harmony. Jiwon began introducing tiny flaws into the bike's control systems, errors so small they wouldn't trigger any diagnostics but would compound over time. The first failure came during Crusher 9's morning patrol. His hoverbike stuttered momentarily as he cruised past the marketplace where he'd assaulted Sungmin Park. The alien frowned but dismissed it as a minor glitch. Vorth technology was supposed to be flawless after all, but the glitches kept coming. Power fluctuations that lasted just seconds. navigation errors that corrected themselves before he could report them. His communication array began suffering from mysterious static bursts that always seemed to happen when he tried to contact his superiors. Meanwhile, 30 feet below the colony's streets, Dong-hyun Kim and Yoonji Park moved through the maintenance tunnels like ghosts. The underground network stretched for miles beneath New Seoul Colony, connecting every major building through a maze of service corridors and utility spaces. The Vorth knew the tunnels existed, but considered them beneath notice. Just another example of human infrastructure inefficiency. That arrogance was their mistake. Dong-hyun had been mapping the tunnel system for months, memorizing every junction and access point. The former reconnaissance specialist could move through the underground maze blindfolded, emerging anywhere in the colony without being detected by surface patrols. Yoonji brought her own expertise to the hunt. The former sniper had spent years studying alien psychology during the war, learning to predict enemy behavior patterns. She watched Crusher 9 through hidden cameras, analyzing his movements and reactions with the patience of a predator studying its prey. The Vorth enforcer followed the same routine every day, driven by military discipline and alien arrogance. Morning, patrol through the commercial district, afternoon inspections of the residential sectors, evening rounds through the industrial zone. But during his evening patrol, something interesting happened. For exactly 47 minutes each night, Crusher 9 separated from the other Vorth patrols to check the colony's perimeter defenses alone. 47 minutes of isolation. 47 minutes when no other aliens would witness what happened to him. Yoonji smiled as she marked the patrol route on her tactical display. The hunter had found his prey's weakness. As the days passed, Crusher 9's equipment failures grew worse. His hoverbike's anti-gravity generators developed an annoying vibration that made his teeth ache. His armor's environmental systems began running hot, forcing him to endure uncomfortable temperature swings. Most frustrating of all, his communication gear filled with static whenever he tried to report the problems. The massive alien's confidence began to crack. Vorth technology was supposed to be superior to anything humans could build. These failures shouldn't be possible. But every diagnostic scan came back clean, showing all systems functioning normally, even as they continued to malfunction around him. Paranoia crept into Crusher 9's mind like poison. He began checking his equipment obsessively, running scan after scan to find problems that shouldn't exist. His patrol routes became erratic, as he struggled with navigation errors that vanished the moment he tried to trace them. The mighty enforcer who'd terrorized New Seoul Colony for months was slowly being driven to distraction by failures he couldn't understand or prevent. Above ground, the colonists began to notice changes in their oppressor's behavior. The arrogant alien who'd strutted through their streets like a conquering god now seemed nervous, constantly fiddling with his equipment and glancing over his shoulder. Word spread through the underground resistance network that something was happening to Crusher 9, though no one could say exactly what. The Phantom operation was working perfectly, and the Vorth enforcer had no idea that his technological superiority was being turned against him by the very humans he considered inferior. The twin moons of New Seoul Colony cast eerie shadows through the industrial sector as Crusher 9's hoverbike sputtered to a complete stop. The massive Vorth enforcer sat motionless for several heartbeats, his yellow eyes scanning the abandoned factories and rusted machinery that surrounded him. This was the third time this week his supposedly superior technology had failed him in the most inconvenient locations possible. Steam hissed from cooling pipes overhead while the alien's razor-sharp claws clicked nervously against his bike's handlebars. The sound echoed off empty buildings like the ticking of a massive clock, counting down to something he couldn't name but instinctively feared. His reptilian hide, normally a source of pride with its battle scars and ceremonial markings, now felt like a target painted bright against the darkness. What Crusher 9 didn't know was that 50 feet above him, Yoonji Park lay perfectly still, on a factory rooftop, her enhanced optics tracking his every movement. The former sniper had been shadowing the alien for hours, using the colony's network of maintenance bridges and ventilation shafts to stay ahead of his patrol route. Her finger rested lightly on her weapon's trigger, but tonight wasn't about killing. Tonight was about fear. Through her communicator, she whispered updates to Dong-Yun Kim, who moved like smoke through the underground tunnels beneath the industrial sector. The reconnaissance specialist had memorized every pipe, every junction, every access hatch in the maze below. He could emerge anywhere within a 3-block radius without making a sound, appearing and disappearing like a ghost from the aliens' nightmares. Crusher 9 dismounted his dead hoverbike with the careful movements of a predator that had suddenly realized it might be prey. His massive boots clanged against the metal grating as he approached the bike's engine housing, his weapon drawn and ready. The plasma rifle's charging whine seemed impossibly loud in the industrial sector's oppressive silence. As he knelt to examine the fusion core, a shadow flickered at the edge of his vision. His head snapped up, yellow eyes blazing with deadly focus, but nothing was there. Just empty air and the gentle sway of cables hanging from overhead power lines. His forked tongue flicked out to taste the air, searching for the scent of human, fear he'd learned to associate with easy prey. Instead, he found something else, a metallic tang that spoke of weapons and death, the smell of hunters closing in for the kill. 2 blocks away, Jiwon Yu sat surrounded by holographic displays in her underground command center, her fingers dancing across control interfaces with the precision of a concert pianist. The colony's entire electronic infrastructure was her instrument, and she was composing a symphony of systematic failure designed to drive the alien enforcer to the edge of madness. With a few keystrokes, she triggered a cascade of minor malfunctions throughout the industrial sector. Streetlights flickered in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Automated systems powered up and down in rhythmic cycles that had no logical explanation. The very air seemed to hum with electronic interference that made Crusher 9's skin crawl with unnatural sensations. The aliens' communication attempts grew more desperate as each transmission dissolved into static before reaching his commanders. His emergency beacons, designed to summon immediate backup in case of ambush, somehow routed their signals through maintenance channels that led nowhere. To any monitoring system, Crusher 9 had simply vanished into the electronic noise that surrounded New Sol Colony's industrial heart. A soft scraping sound from behind made the enforcer spin around, his plasma rifle tracking across empty shadows. His breathing had become labored, each intake of air sounding like thunder in the oppressive quiet. The confident predator who'd terrorized human colonists for months was discovering what his victims had felt, the paralyzing certainty that death was watching from the darkness. Yunji smiled as she watched the aliens' growing panic through her scope. She'd fought creatures from a dozen different worlds during the war, learning that fear was universal. Every predator, no matter how deadly, became vulnerable once it realized it was being hunted. The key was patience, letting terror build slowly until the target made the fatal mistake of running instead of thinking. From a ventilation grate 20 feet away, Dong-Yun observed the aliens' deteriorating composure with professional interest. Crusher 9's military training was warring with primal instincts that screamed danger. His head turned constantly, trying to track threats that existed everywhere and nowhere. His weapons targeting system, corrupted by Jiwon's electronic warfare, painted false contacts across his helmet display, phantom targets that vanished when he tried to engage them. The industrial sector's ambient sounds became a torture device, designed by human ingenuity. Cooling metal clicked and pinged in irregular rhythms that suggested footsteps. Wind through broken windows whistled with almost voice-like qualities that made the alien's spine crawl. Every normal noise of a shutting-down factory district transformed into potential evidence of human hunters closing their trap. Crusher 9's hoverbike lay dead beside him, its quantum fusion core deliberately overloaded by microscopic sabotage that would leave no trace for Vorth investigators. His communication gear filled his helmet with white noise that masked any real sounds his pursuers might make. His armor's environmental systems, compromised by carefully introduced flaws, made him sweat despite the cool night air. For the first time since arriving on New Sol Colony, the apex predator understood what it meant to be hunted by something smarter, more patient, and infinitely more dangerous than himself. The humans he'd dismissed as inferior vermin were teaching him a lesson his species would never forget, that Earth's children had learned to hunt monsters in the dark places between the stars. The abandoned fusion plant squatted like a metal beast on the edge of New Sol Colony's industrial district. Its massive cooling towers stretched toward the stars, while rusted pipes and twisted catwalks created a maze of shadows, perfect for what was about to happen. The plant had been shut down for years after a containment breach, leaving behind only empty chambers and the lingering hum of dormant reactors. Crusher 9 stumbled through the plant's entrance, his damaged hoverbike finally giving up completely. In a shower of sparks and dying electronics, the massive Vorth Enforcer's yellow eyes darted frantically as he searched for escape routes, but every corridor seemed to lead deeper into the facility's heart. His plasma rifle trembled in his clawed hands as paranoia consumed what remained of his military discipline. Behind him, 6 shadows detached themselves from the darkness with the fluid grace of apex predators. They moved without sound across the metal flooring, their footsteps muffled by years of special forces training. Each carried the invisible weight of countless battles fought in the void between stars, their faces marked by scars that told stories of humanity's refusal to surrender. The cooling chamber stretched before them like a cathedral of steel and ceramic. Massive cylindrical structures rose 50 feet into the darkness, while intricate piping created geometric patterns across the walls. The chamber's acoustic properties had been designed to contain the roar of fusion reactions, which made it perfect for conversations that needed to stay private. Jihoon stepped into the pale light cast by emergency illumination strips, his weathered face calm as mountain stone. In his hands he held a photograph printed on old-fashioned paper, Sungmin Park lying unconscious in his hospital bed, medical tubes snaking from his frail body like technological parasites. The image hit Crusher 9 like a physical blow, reminding him of the moment his arrogance had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. "You hurt our elder," Jihoon said, his voice carrying across the chamber with quiet authority. "Our teacher, our family." 5 more figures emerged from the shadows around the chamber's perimeter, forming a loose circle that gave the alien nowhere to run. Hyunwoo's scarred features showed no emotion as he studied the creature that had terrorized innocent colonists for months. Beside him, Jiwon held a tablet displaying the electronic warfare campaign that had driven Crusher 9 to this moment of reckoning. The massive Vorth warrior's reptilian hide glistened with nervous sweat as he pressed his back against the cooling chamber's steel wall. His weapons targeting system painted false contacts across his helmet display, phantom threats that seemed to mock his desperation. For the first time in his brutal career, the apex predator understood what it meant to be completely outmatched. "Please," Crusher 9's voice cracked like breaking glass, the sound echoing strangely in the chamber's acoustic dampening. "I was following orders, standard occupation protocol. I meant no permanent harm to the old one." Hyunwoo stepped forward, his command presence filling the space like a physical force. 20 years of leading humanity's finest warriors had given his voice the kind of authority that made even alien predators take notice. "Harm. You humiliated a man who bled for human freedom before your species even knew we existed." The former. SEAL Commander's words carried the weight of history behind them. Sungmin Park had fought in the Martian Independence War, leading desperate human forces against impossible odds when Earth's colonies faced extinction. He'd trained 3 generations of Special Forces operators, turning frightened recruits into the galaxy's most feared warriors through sheer force of will and unbreakable dedication. Crusher 9's massive form began to shake as the full reality of his situation crashed down around him. These weren't random colonists driven by momentary anger. They were humanity's apex predators, bound together by loyalty that transcended time and space. His knees buckled as decades of Vorth arrogance crumbled like paper in a firestorm. "What do you want?" The alien's voice dropped to a desperate whisper as he fell to the chamber's cold floor. "Credits? Territory? I can arrange transfers to better worlds. Mining rights, shipping contracts, name your price." Jihoon knelt beside the broken enforcer, bringing their faces level despite the alien's massive size. When he spoke, his words carried the quiet certainty of someone who'd made peace with death long ago. "We want you to leave. Tonight. forever. And you'll spread word among your kind about what happens when humans protect their own. From across the chamber, Dongyun activated a holographic projector that filled the space with images from dozens of different worlds. Human colonies scattered across the galaxy, each one home to veterans who'd answered the call when their elder was attacked. The display showed cargo ships changing course, mining stations going dark, and trade routes being quietly abandoned as humanity's hidden network mobilized for war. "Touch our elders, our children, our families," Hyunwoo added, his scarred hands resting calmly at his sides, "and we will find you. We will always find you." So-young emerged from the shadows carrying a small data chip that seemed to glow with malevolent purpose in the emergency lighting. Her freighter captain's uniform was stained with engine grease and stellar dust, but her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who'd fought battles across half the galaxy. "Security footage from every world in this sector," she explained as she placed the chip beside Crusher 9's trembling form. "Every Vorth who thinks humans are weak, every enforcer who believes superior technology makes them untouchable. Show them what happens when they test that theory." As if summoned by some invisible signal, Crusher 9's hoverbike roared back to life outside the cooling chamber. Its fusion core hummed with perfect efficiency, every system functioning flawlessly for the first time in days. The miraculous restoration wasn't mercy. It was a demonstration that humanity's technological mastery exceeded anything the Vorth had imagined possible. The broken enforcer stumbled toward his restored vehicle like a drowning man reaching for salvation. His massive frame seemed to shrink as he mounted the bike, the proud warrior replaced by something much smaller and infinitely more afraid. As the hoverbike's engines lifted him into the night sky, he carried with him a lesson that would echo across the galaxy. 3 days later, Sungmin Park opened his eyes in the medical center to find his room transformed into a garden of impossible beauty. Flowers from 17 different star systems filled every available space, their alien scents, mixing with messages of love and respect from across known space. The old veteran's weathered face creased into a smile as he read card after card from the warriors he'd trained and the families they'd built among the stars. Outside his window, New Sol Colony buzzed with quiet activity as human colonists went about their daily lives with renewed confidence. The Vorth garrison had received new orders overnight, strict protocols about respecting civilian populations and avoiding unnecessary confrontations. Word had spread through their command structure about an enforcer who'd simply vanished from patrol duty, leaving behind only cryptic warnings about humanity's hidden strength. In the depths of space, cargo ships resumed their normal routes while mining stations powered back up and trade networks stabilized. The invisible army that had mobilized for war faded back into civilian life, but the message had been delivered with crystal clarity. Humanity protected its own, and the price of forgetting that lesson was higher than any alien species was prepared to pay. The end.